Good evening to all of you. This is Piyush. So as you all know that from today we have started our daily answer writing program for history optional. As per the promise, the notes had been uploaded in the morning only, and along with the notes there was a question also. So today the notes that we had uploaded, it is from the topic sources, and it was precisely on one source, that's called as Vedas. So we have just tried to cover the relevant content in the notes itself, but then you cannot ignore that discussion, because in the discussion you can find many other information, other relevant information, and you can add all these things in order to complete that particular topic. So what was the question given to you today? It was a very simple question that discussed the Vedas as source of history. Now before I begin with the answer, I would like to tell you something, that whenever you see the simple question, because many of you must be finding this question as very simple, and you believe that since it is a simple question, everybody would be writing the answer. But whenever you find a question simple, you should always keep in mind that by doing something, you have to keep your answer better than others. So the point is that if this is the question about the Vedas, how to make this particular answer better over the others or than others? In that case, there are few suggestions. Whenever you have been attempting such kind of questions, what you believe that the others also would be writing, and in fact they would be writing a good answer, in that case focus on few things. First of all, focus on structure. If you are keeping your structure better and tight, very concrete than others, in that case it is giving you an edge. The second thing, play with the keywords. They are always important in the questions, but in these kind of questions they become more important, because if you have been incorporating the right and the relevant keywords, in that case undoubtedly it is giving a lead to you. And the third thing, that if you can include certain historians, that is, I believe that mostly not there with most of the aspirants. So by using or by including few of the historians, your answer can become better. Correct? So by keeping in these things mind, we will just try to discuss about today's question. So today's question is, discuss the Vedas as source of history. Undoubtedly, there are three parts of answer. The first is introduction. Now, how to frame the introduction of this question? In the introduction, you are supposed to write about some basic things of the Vedas that can introduce the Vedas to the evaluator, such as you should include always the age, that in which particular period the Vedas were developed. The second thing, what sort of literature this was. So basically it's a religious literature in nature. And the third thing that I'll definitely ask you to include, it's about the composition and compilation, because it was composed in a different era or different phase, and it was compiled in a different period. So by including these kind of things, you are going to write the introduction. Then it comes to the body part. Now in the body part, as I told you, that you have to keep the structure very tight. Because mostly I have noticed that whenever such kind of questions are being asked, students are writing the answers as per the information. Whatsoever information which can be received or which can be retrieved from the Vedas, they are just being written in a very random manner. So if you have been following that, in that case there are two problems. First of all, you can miss several important information. That's number one. The second thing, it is going to be highly unorganized, and that's why you should arrange the information in a proper order. So you'll be writing that yes, Vedas are undoubtedly very good source of history. And on what ground we can say so? Because point number one, it is dealing with the geography. Since it is providing us information on various rivers and the mountains, and on the basis of that we can understand the Indian geography, the topography at that point of time. So that is one part you'll be writing. Undoubtedly you have to include certain examples also, and in fact try to include the various examples on every point or in every point that can somehow enhance the quality of your answer. So geography such as Rig Veda is referring these rivers, later Vedas are giving the references of, let's say, Ganga, Yamuna and some other rivers. So that's how geography part can be discussed. Now point number two is coming to the political details. Now while writing the political detail, you should definitely mention the word transition, because with the help of the Vedas, which are 4 Vedas that you all know, so since these are given in the model, and that's why I'm not giving these kind of details. So Vedas are telling us about the transition from early Vedic to later Vedic period. And within this transition, you can incorporate several words, such as whether the state was existing or not, whether the Rajan or ruling power is mentioned or not, right? What sort of historical events are being referred, such as here you can discuss about the battle of 10 kings, right? Then you can talk about the various political institutions such as Sabha, Samiti, Vidat and Gan. So these are various information in particular order you can arrange it, right? Moving to the next part, that is economy. When it comes to economy, again you should talk about the transition. So from early to later Vedic period, there is a transition, and how do we see this transition? So when it comes to early Vedic period, as per the details which are given, it seems that they were leading a nomadic life, and cattle rearing was the most important occupation for them, because cow had been given much privilege, or let's say much important position. Then it comes to the second part, like transition in the later Vedic period, and there will be writing about basically the way these people are gradually converting into an agriculturist community. Now what is the example for this? We will be talking about Atharva Veda, which is giving information about the various stages and important activities of agriculture, and that's how we will be writing about the transition. So you don't need to stretch it, simply you need to show the transition with the help of certain examples. After economy, the third point will be on society, or again the social transition. So again in society you have to show that from early Vedic to later Vedic period there was a transition that we do understand from the Vedas itself. Such as when it comes to the society in the early Vedic period, that used to be simple. There was no division in the society, there was no complexity in the society, there was no hierarchy or any sort of hierarchy in the society. The moment we enter into later Vedic period, we can find out or figure out certain complexities coming into the society. Now complexity with respect to basically the Varna, or let's say various institutions that include such as Varna, then Gotra and other institutions. So by referring certain examples, we'll be proving okay, these are the institutions coming in later Vedic period, and that's how we can talk about basically the complexity coming into the society. Then it comes to the religion. Next point is the religion. Again in the religion we'll be talking about certain changes in the transition. So in the early Vedic period, the religion used to be simple. In the later Vedic period, the religion is becoming slightly complex. In the early Vedic period, as per the Rig Veda, it seems that the religion was accessible by all, even including women. On the other hand, the moment we enter into the later Vedic period, it seems that now certain religious institutions are coming, specifically the yajnas, sacrifices, rituals are becoming more important, and in fact, access to the religion was also not egalitarian, rather it was hierarchical now. So everybody was not getting equal access, that we understand from the Vedas. There is another point that you can talk about is about the language and development of language and literature. So the Vedas somehow help us to understand the development of Sanskrit specifically, because there was a sort of grooming of Sanskrit or the evolution of Sanskrit that we understand with the help of Vedas. And in fact there was one scholar, Michael Witzel, who is talking about the importance of Vedas with respect to the understanding of the evolution of Sanskrit. So these are some important points that we will be discussing in the body part. But since it is asking you to discuss the Vedas as source of history, it means that you need to write about some critical aspects also. So then we will be dividing your body part into the second into the second part. You will take your answer to the second part, and there will be giving the heading limitations of the Vedas as source of history. Now in the limitations again you need to keep certain points and you need to write about them. The first point, that they are religious in nature. I think as you all understand the primary objective of Vedas was to tell the people about religion, and this is the reason because of what it remains very much religious in nature. And in fact there was so many mythological events or mythological things are being discussed, that is somehow making it less important in history. Why? Because mythological events are not having great importance in history. The second important thing is basically about the consciousness of time was missing. That's a biggest lacuna of history. So they are never providing the information along with the timeline. So chronology is missing. The time is missing because Vedas are mostly conscious for either the cyclic notion of time, or else they are basically focusing on the micro units of time, and both of them are not very important for history, because the history is history is more interested in sort of general units of time such as years, centuries, decades and so on, which is missing. Moving to the next is the sense of space is also missing. Now what is sense of space? In which particular region that event is happening, or that developments were going on. So basically in Vedas you do not find the direct reference of the places or the cities or whatsoever habitational areas were there. Rather we extract these information, and that's how it becomes a sort of lacuna with the Vedas. Moving to next problem is about the authorship. So yes, the authorship with the Vedas are not very clear, and until and unless we are clear about the authorship, we cannot locate the text in a particular category and as a source of information. Next problem is the Brahminical perspective. So undoubtedly Vedas were written by the Brahmins, and that's why it is always presenting a sort of Brahminical perspective of the society that may be ideal but not real. Next point is the life negation. Now what is this life negation? Normally they were not writing about the material world, rather they had been writing about that supernatural world, and in history, history is not interested in that supernatural world, rather it is interested in the material world. On the other hand, Vedas remain very isolated from the material world, and that is not fit in the category of history. Then it comes to another important problem is about the gap between composition and compilation. The composition of the Vedas took place in a longer period of time. On the other hand, the compilation is taking place somewhere in the Gupta period. So there is a good gap, time gap between the composition and compilation, and that makes it problematic that for which particular period we should extract the information for the Vedas. Next is about the extrapolation. Since the composition and compilation both consumed a larger period, and that's there is great possibility or the probability for the extrapolation. Now these are the key terms that you should definitely include. So there is a great possibility of the extrapolation, and that's how the reliability of the Vedas as source of history becomes bit doubtful. That's also one thing that you should mention. So this is how you'll be mentioning the limitation in the body part, and then it comes to the final part, that is conclusion. When it comes to conclusion, right, so now in the conclusion, in order to make it better than others, you can include certain historians. By including those historians, somehow as I told you that your answer would be getting a sort of better reward, I must say. Now in the conclusion, there is of course longer list of the scholars, those who have been talking about it, but then you don't need to write about everyone. I think Romila Thapar is very important here. Why? Because she talks about the symbolic nature of the Vedas. Matlab, it doesn't carry the information directly, rather it carries basically the information in a very symbolic manner, and that's how historians need to extract the information from it, rather than they can take the information as it is directly from the Vedas. That's number one. Second is A.L. Bossum. Now A.L. Bossum is very critical to the Vedas, and he writes that actually they are mostly religious in nature, and that's how it is it remains as a great limitation. Yet he did not discard the utility of the Vedas as source of history, and he highlights that. Next is Michael Witzel. Michael Witzel, as I have already discussed about him, he is talking about the utility of Vedas in order to understand the development of language and literature in India. And most importantly, you can include another scholar, postmodernist scholar called as Selden Pollock. Why Selden Pollock is very important? Because she tried to understand it with a very different perspective. She is a postmodernist and very recent scholar. So Selden Pollock says that it cannot be taken merely as the collection of facts, because that's what mostly believed for the Vedas. But then she says it is not merely the collection of facts, rather she says that actually it was shaped by the power dynamics and the ideologies prevailing at that point of time. So she is trying to say that if you'll read Vedas properly, in that case you'll be able to understand various things, in fact the history of ideas also from the Vedas, and this is a sort of very creative idea that has been discussed by her. So I think you can end the answer with Selden Pollock, but then at the end you need to write one statement which is very important. In fact, again I'll say that this is a keyword that you should definitely include, and that is about the juxtaposition, right? What is juxtaposition? That yes, Vedas do provide us various information along with its limitation, but then if Vedas are juxtaposed with any other available source, if any, I am telling you, if any, in that case they would be proved as very good source of history. That's the answer of this question. So I believe that through the notes and through this discussion we have covered most of the relevant parts of the Vedas, and that would be quite useful to you. Thank you very much.